Are people like Tucker and MTG, are they pro-Palestine or they're just anti-Israel? Two different things. But even if you accept that they are, they're horrible on a lot of other issues we should also care about. If you actually care about the human rights of Palestinians, you should also care about the human rights of people in detention, in ICE detention facilities in the US. You should care about minorities and migrants who are being repressed here in the US. There are people that the MTGs and Tuckers and Candaces don't care about.
Mehdi Hasan, on his Zedio show, has issued a clear warning to people on the left, Democrats, progressives, or whatever label you prefer, about trusting far-right figures like Tucker Carlson, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and Megyn Kelly, who at the moment seem to be taking positions that appear anti-Trump. We are going to look at some clips of what Mehdi Hasan had to say about Tucker Carlson and others, and I also want to share my thoughts because this is a very interesting topic, so let's get into it together.
How do we avoid getting catfished by a Democrat who uses pro-Palestine and affordability language publicly, but has no real belief in those ideas, aka Gavin? And then Sam W. adds, from a multi-generational family of anti-war, pro-human rights Democrats. My entire family identity is opposition against this and genocide. I'm independent now because I can't stand being in the same party as genocidal warmongers. WTF am I supposed to do? Vote for Tucker?
Well, Tucker's not running. Let's just if he runs across that bridge. I think you've got to be. So I interviewed Noura Erakat, the Palestinian-American academic in New York last week. We're going to be airing that interview either later tonight or tomorrow. Look out for it in your inboxes if you're a Zeteo subscriber. Another reason to subscribe, Zeteo.com. Noura made a very good point. You may have heard the phrase PEP, Progressive Accept Palestine. People who are really, really left-wing, really, really liberal, except on Palestine, then they're pro-Israel. You see that in the Democratic Party all the time. But what Noura said, something I'd not come across, she talked about POPs. And I said to her, I'm going to steal, I'm going to talk about it all the time. Progressive only on Palestine, right? That's your issue that you care about, but you don't care about other issues that are related. For example, you're opposed to the detention of Palestinians by Israel, but you don't speak out against mass incarceration at home. You don't take progressive stances on issues that are very similar to the issues you care about in Gaza and the West Bank. And I think that's an important way of looking at this, because even if you agree that Tucker Carlson is good, quote unquote, on Palestine, and I think Ta-Nehisi Coates made a good point the other day, are people like Tucker and MTG, are they pro-Palestine or they're just anti-Israel? Two different things. But even if you accept that they are, they're horrible on a lot of other issues we should also care about. If you actually care about the human rights of Palestinians, you should also care about the human rights of people in detention, in ICE detention facilities in the US. You should care about minorities and migrants who are being repressed here in the US. There are people that the MTGs and Tuckers and Candaces don't care about. They support those crackdowns. You should also care about Black Lives Matter. You should care about mass incarceration of black people and horrible repression of minority communities. Those are all issues that you should also care about. And therefore, the vehicle for that cannot be the current Republican Party, even the MAGA anti-war movement, cannot be the Tucker Carlson, because they don't care about all those issues. And so to the questioner who says, I can't bear to be in the Democratic Party with genocidal warmongers, I get it. 100%. I wouldn't want to be in a party with Josh Gottheimer or John Fetterman. They're repulsive human beings. And Joe Biden was complicit in a genocide and should be punished for that, but he never will be. But in that Democratic Party, there are also people like Delia Ramirez, who's right now trying to block bombs from being sent to Israel. Member of Congress from Illinois. There's people like Greg Kasar, the chair of the Progressive Caucus, who's been very outspoken about military aid to Israel. There's people like AOC and Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib. Ro Khanna, who has led the charge against the war in Iran and tried to put out the War Powers resolution that they'll be voting on maybe later this week. There are people running in primaries right now in places like New Jersey calling out Israel. There's a Democratic mayor of New York who's willing to call Trump a fascist to his face and say the G word, genocide, in the Oval Office, Zoran Mamdani. So if we reduce the Democratic Party just to, people like the warmongers, I think that's a disservice. And I think it's elevating Tucker Carlson to a level he doesn't deserve, because, as I say, yes, he's been good on Israel, good on Iran. But is he good on the other issues we should all care about? That's a question we still have to answer. And as for the question about, what was the previous question? There was a link question about, catfishing. 100% agree on the cat. It's a very dangerous strategy that the Democrats are adopting, not just because people are going to fall for it and think, oh, these guys are pro-Palestine now, and they're not. And actually, we saw that in 2020. Do you remember, Prem? There were some people running in 2020 in the primary who said, oh, I won't go to the AIPAC convention. That was their way of signaling that they had moved on Palestine. I think Kamala Harris was one of them. And I think it's very easy rhetorically to say, oh, I get it, I'm shifting with the base, and then once you get elected, carry on selling weapons to Israel and say, well, that's fine. Biden did it. Do you remember Biden in 2020 said, we're going to make Saudi Arabia a pariah? People were, oh yeah! People like me were like, good, I'm glad he said that. And then he became president and was fist bumping with MBS, if you remember. So yes, it is very easy for people to lie to you during primary campaigns. That's why we need more candidates running. That's why we need more progressives on the debate stage to call each other out. That's why we need people to be held to account during the primary process, not have any kind of coronation. Have your Ro Khannas and AOCs and Chris Van Hollands and others, John Ossoff, let's see, running where they can actually have on stage, hold each other to account on this crucial issue of genocide and foreign wars.
I think all that's very, very well put, and I would just add that I totally understand the impulse by a lot of people to desire and wish for this coalition building to break through the duopoly, and I think there's actually a lot of movement on that. I think one thing that I think is important is to have like some self-respect and self-dignity in what you already believe in your position, which is to say, there was this great TikTok comment I saw on a video of Tucker, as usual, lately kind of cooking, and someone said, pay attention, you're not agreeing with Tucker Carlson, he's agreeing with you. And I think it's high time for a lot of people to own their position.
Yes, there's a weird deference
because of you.
Yes. There's a weird deference to the right, right? It's like I always make this joke as a Muslim. I can make this joke, which is like if you're in Muslim communities, there's always this thing about like which famous white person is going to convert to Islam. When I was growing up, is Michael Jackson a Muslim? Is somebody else a Muslim? Is Simon Cowell a Muslim? And we're like, why are we so insecure that we need other people to convert to Islam? I remember that, and I feel like the left has a version of that, which is like, which right winger is saying something we agree with? Isn't that amazing that right winger said it? And it's like there are people on the left who are already saying that who are not getting credit. And I got criticized rightly by a bunch of people recently when I praised Tucker Carlson on the Economist interview when he called out the right to exist propaganda, and I said, first time someone's done that on mainstream media, and people pointed out that's not true. Ta-Nehisi Coates did it to Tony DeCopel in that famous CBS News, that CBS Morning interview. I'd forgotten that. Fair point. Ta-Nehisi did it first. So you're right. That comment you're quoting, absolutely brilliant. We should accept that people are coming to our way of thinking and not chase after crumbs from the right-wing table.
This point from Mehdi Hasan is absolutely spot on in my opinion, and I have two words that I think prove he is right about this, and those two words are Liz Cheney. It was only a little over a year ago when Kamala Harris was campaigning alongside Liz Cheney, and a lot of people on the left, Democrats and progressives, were frustrated by that, because Liz Cheney stands against almost everything the left believes in. The only reason she aligned in that moment was because she opposed Donald Trump. And let's be honest, that opposition seemed more personal than policy-driven, especially considering Trump's past comments about her father. Similar to the Bush family, Trump insulted them, so naturally there is tension there. But Liz Cheney was never truly against Trump's policies. In fact, she supported most of them. So it raises a real question about why Democrats would embrace someone like that. This is exactly why Mehdi Hasan's warning makes sense. When people like Tucker Carlson, Marjorie Taylor Greene, or Megyn Kelly agree with you on one or two issues, such as opposing war with Iran or criticizing Israel, it does not mean they are suddenly aligned with your values. As Hasan pointed out, are they actually pro-Palestine or are they simply anti-Israel? It seems much closer to the latter, and in many cases their stance comes down to not wanting to spend money abroad, which is something I personally agree with to an extent, because I support reducing foreign spending and focusing more on domestic needs. But here is the contradiction. If you suggest taking that saved money and investing it into programs like Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, or improving education, many of those same right-wing figures strongly oppose those ideas. So the alignment is very limited and very selective. That is why Hasan and his editor Prem are right to frame it as these figures occasionally coming toward your position on specific issues, not you shifting toward theirs. These are not people who are suddenly part of your political side, and that is unlikely to change. Tucker Carlson is not becoming a progressive, and Megyn Kelly has even said openly that she would not support a Democrat under any circumstances, even in extreme situations. So yes, we are in a strange political moment where unexpected alliances appear, and now that phrase "strange bedfellows" makes a lot more sense. There are figures like Tucker Carlson, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and Megyn Kelly who you might agree with on one or two points, but strongly disagree with on almost everything else. And honestly, some of their views go far beyond politics. I was recently watching one of Tucker Carlson's long interviews where he seriously discussed topics like demon possession with a Catholic priest, asking how someone could tell if they were possessed and what causes it, instead of questioning the premise itself. That kind of content shows a very different side of him. So while he may occasionally land on the right side of a single issue, that does not suddenly make him a reliable or trustworthy figure. If his positions happen to weaken MAGA or reduce Donald Trump's influence, then sure, that outcome might be beneficial in a broader political sense. But that does not mean people like him or Marjorie Taylor Greene should be welcomed into the Democratic space or treated as allies. So I want to hear your thoughts. Do you agree with Mehdi Hasan's warning about Tucker Carlson and others, that they are not truly your allies? Because in this situation, the idea that the enemy of your enemy is your friend does not fully apply. Let me know what you think in the comments, and if you found this discussion interesting, make sure to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more.